and we'll be talking about it some at Easy's Corner tonight later, which is the Monday show I've been hosting for a little over 5 years weekly. Much love. Keep growing.
Much love, buddy. All right. Okay, and we are live on video. So hello and welcome to Let's Grow Live. If you're just tuning in, we are live 24/7 on X Spaces, and this is a video component that we are feeding into it. Joining us here today is Daniel, the founder of Impact Launchpad, as well as Is There Enough? What a good question to be asking. I want to talk about all of the good things that you're working on, and particularly the Launchpad and specifically around the World Game. So why don't we start with the World Game, okay? Tell us, what on earth is the World Game?
Well, first of all, it's something we all have an interest in, whether we think of it in that frame or not. It was invented by Buckminster Fuller. And he thought of it as something that was the opposite of a war game. How to make the world work for 100% of humanity, or as close as we can get to that in the shortest time possible, and a few other conditions, like without ecological offense or disadvantage to anyone. You know, things that we'd all broadly be interested in. And the way he would examine it as an engineer rather than a warrior is, what do we do about it? And when I looked at that question for a long story of reasons, you know, I once came upon the idea that the way we could do that is to invest in it. And we all have different ways to examine how to play the world game, because I am a big macro thinker like you. You know, we groove a lot on looking at things in a very big picture from our personal experience. That's something you and I have in common. But we all look at the world in very different ways. You know, I have my world, our world, the world order or disorder, and so on and so forth, right? And I think, you know, the idea to set out and do that is I would listen to people like Sean and deal with people like Sean and you and lots of projects that I support and develop, as many of the best people in the social impact investment space are doing, really doing a great job at, but not fast enough. Not for where we're at. And so I came up with a concept that we call the Bank of Humanity as a way to invest in that, so that the peoples of the world like Sean and yourself could have a much easier time of moving forward. So I came up with that concept. People loved it, but they thought it was impossible to pull off to a person. You've had this experience. We've discussed this off camera, where people love what you're doing and go, hope you can pull it off, kind of thing. There is that aspect of possibilities that seem utopian to people who are afraid of that aspect. And so it's very hard to take innovation that really exists already in humanity right now. We just saw a demonstration of the capability of doing in a few minutes what once upon a time would have taken years to do, if at all, right? That's all in the hands of ordinary people. How do we begin to ask the engineering question of what we do about that? I came up with that solution. I've got a model for that. You know about that. And we intend over the next 24 months to launch our first pilot of that. But more importantly, I guess, to everybody that's relevant here, is that out of that concept, once upon a time, I accidentally expressed this question for those on video to see it on here. And I'll say, I accidentally stumbled onto this question, is there enough? And there was such an incredible response to how it became a conversation of people to look at the world game as both my world and the world in general, of how do I make it better instead of destroying it? And that became the conversation of, is there enough? Which led us to this realization of, how do we create true wealth that's higher than what we have now? How do we grow the pie? And that is not by resources, it's by agreement. Everything that's there that you're doing, Jimmy, is there, but it takes you and someone like you and all the people that have collaborated with you to just say, you know what, we're going to put all that together and make it happen. And I think there's a world of Jimmy Cohens out there that we have yet to bring to the attention of everybody. that this kind of broadcast does. So I just think that if we can begin to get conversation in society while things are breaking down in the world order, and they are, we can recognize that why it's so difficult to build wealth is because it's difficult for us to build agreement. Everything that you do every day and that I try to do every day is incredibly difficult. We have so much vested interest in being at war with each other, culturally, cyber war, but even just in our basic language and conversation. And that's basically the two parts of us, is that, you know, we started out with an idea of how to invest in humanity, and it turned out that the way we had to do it was build more agreement in humanity. And to the point that we invented, as you have mentioned to people, a treaty of humanity, to be the first treaty ever signed by individuals, not nations, and be treated like that, as an individual commitment of people to say, I'm going to thank my ancestors of warriors who brought me here. That's why we survived and can be sitting here and have this conversation. That was necessary. But how do we, for our own survival, learn how to collaborate more than we are in conflict, and take that as a personal responsibility, not just as a nation state one, just like you taking the personal responsibility of being the savior of trees. You know, that's a choice you made, an exercise you made, and then you went out and enrolled people to it. It's not enough that you had an idea, you went out and got agreement. To me, you're the agreement economy, not just the tree economy, right? Which is why you fit within us, because it doesn't exist right now for everybody to, you know, buy tokens or whatever, but one day there will be, pretty near future, an agreement economy being released by us, which we expect that will be acknowledging and honoring what you're doing with your tokenomics as being something worth something in our economy. And if you think about how practical it is, every economy is an agreement economy. Every economy is an agreement economy. Wealth is not built by resources or war. Look how poor everybody's going to be during this war. That should just end the debate about whether war is a money-making tool for anybody. We're just taxing humanity for no reason at all, right? So what we have to figure out is, how do we grow the pie through collaboration? And it isn't sitting here holding hands and praying for peace. It's how do we get together and even tolerate the people we may not love, but in a way that's safe for all of us, to manufacture more agreement, more agreement, more agreement, more agreement. So that's why I was immediately in love with everything that you're doing. And I know I've spoken quite a bit to just one question, to just say that I want to say, for everybody's benefit in the room, we all encounter people who help us see the world in a different way. I was talking about the world and our worldview and everything. And the reason why what you're doing is so electric, and you're just going to have to accept this fawning I'm about to do on you, but it's purposeful for me to say, Jimmy, is because you are basically going out and I guess what I'm trying to say is you have helped me sort of, and I think this stands in for a lot of other people, to appreciate trees in a different way. And how valuable is that in the long run? You know, just from your expression. And what you and I can do, and everybody here can do, and all the Gitcoin community can do, as we're all trying to figure out, as you know, Sean has put together here, how do we develop ecosystems which incubate and grow ideas? And so I'll land my plane, so to speak, here for us to continue to say, the thesis of Impact Launchpad is that everything we need for humanity to thrive is already in existence. If we somehow artificially shut off innovation tomorrow, if we just implement what we've already invented, we can live sustainably and in peace of 10 billion people with what we just have right now. So we do have to really think, and I'm an Al Gore trained climate reality advisor and activist to say this, we have to treat our collaboration with each other more important than climate change itself, because we can't solve climate change without it. And you're proof of that, right? Because you're actually going out and doing something out of collaboration to respond to it. You're not just writing posts about how terrible that the fossil fuel industry did this and hid this. And those are stories I want to tell, believe me, and those are reparations I want to see. But we really have to get on with what we're going to do about it. That's what the Is There Enough question is about. That's what the World Game question is about, is what are we going to do about it, us?
Okay. So what we're going to do about it is increase collaboration, increase agreement amongst humanity so that we have that starting point to really grow from. So then my next question would be, how can we have universal agreement? How can we get as many people as possible to be in understanding, collaboration, and agreement with one another to sign this treaty and to grow? What do you think the how is there now that we've established the why?
I think it's having people recognize the personal advantage of it first. Because if it's on behalf of the world, it'll be in the choir. But for it to be mainstream, people have to really see it as something in their own interests. Buckminster Fuller said, without ecological offense or disadvantage to anyone. He chose his words so carefully that he invented words when they didn't suffice for him. So I think it has to work for the each and the all, not just the world generally. This is critical. And I think that begins in language, where people begin to examine. This is why I accidentally stumbled on, because of course, Jimmy, is there enough? I'm asking you for real now.
Is there enough? Well, I think that that depends. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question is like food. I for a big part of my life, I thought that food was a very scarce resource, that the people were starving because there wasn't enough of it. But I then later in life learned that actually, yes, there's abundance of food. It's just not distributed. There's a distribution problem, and there's a waste problem, and there are those things. The next thing that comes to mind is compassion and love, and like, is there enough of that? Because I think that's kind of the underlying driver of people actually doing something about all of the problems that we have, from water scarcity to poverty to climate change. Do people actually care? As long as they're good, what about all the other people? What about all the other animals? What about Mother Nature herself?
And this little conversation, yeah, go ahead, keep going.
And yeah, so is there enough compassion? Well, I think that while it is a spectrum for a lot of people, from empath to sociopath, it's not necessarily 100% fixed, and that it is a sliding scale, and through certain experiences we can grow connection and empathy, and then ultimately compassion for the thing. So in that sense, it's kind of dormant for a lot of people, at least to the extent that it could be. And so is there enough? Yes, there is, but is it out there? Is it unleashed yet? Not yet.
It's fascinating because, we've had this conversation over 5,000 hours in 30 countries, and I've never heard anybody answer quite the way you did, first of all. And second, like, if I'm ever teaching people how to have this conversation, like part of the survey, social research we do and stuff like that, which they have their own personal benefit out of, because they learn a lot about agreement doing that. It's a little exercise we have. I say the first agreement that you're looking for, you want to ask, how do you get agreement with the world? You start with a first agreement. Then you get a second. Then you get a third, and so on, right? If you go too far on the fourth, you go back to the third. You find another fourth. There's a methodology to this, right? You start with sameness before difference. You understand the difference between values and positions. Normal things right there. But when I'm explaining this to people, I go, the first agreement we're looking for is that it's conditional and situational, which is exactly what you just demonstrated, right? Like, I've had people go, which is rare for somebody to go, well, yes, there's enough, just like that. They've practiced abundance thinking, study Peter Diamandis, all that sort of stuff, right? And I'll say to them, well, what would it take for everybody to have access to it? And that's, you just did that demonstration, basically talking about the food and all of that, right? And then you go, really the most important thing, which is there enough compassion and regard for everybody to actually make that happen, right? And I think that the first thing to recognize is that, first of all, incrementalism in this day and age is very powerful. Like, what if there's only 1 or 2% of humanity that thinks in the way that we're talking about? That's a historically massive number of people to create a tribe out of making the world better, of world game workers is what I'd call, which a lot of them feel very lonely, right? That's why this is so great that we now have these tools to connect like this, right? But I think that each of us has an enough bucket and a not enough bucket. That's the condition and situation. It becomes like a measuring tool. It's like a very baby step of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? It's like very elemental. Like I can ask a 5-year-old what they have enough of and not enough of, and they totally relate to the conversation. And, it's normal and natural for a child to be very self-interested more than an adult by general. And they're totally like serving health in many ways just to grow their needs, right? Through this prism. I've done this in a kindergarten class, by the way. I'll tell you that story sometime. But the fact is, this very simple examination of what's in my enough bucket, which is my opportunity for gratitude, often missed by counting it up. Just like when you measure something in blockchain, it becomes more valuable. What happens when a human being actually measures what they have enough of? Let's think about it. What is the opposite of hate? Conflict is solution. What's the opposite of grievance? Is recognition of what's already working, right? So the enough bucket's very important, and the not enough bucket is where people's values are. Like you went to the compassion because you value it so highly. So for you, there can't be enough of it in a way, right? For me, it's about proliferation of ideas. Like how do I get more tools and resources into the Jimmy's and the Sean's hands of the world so we can really proliferate all this implementation I'm so excited about. Like when you talk about one of our projects I've mentioned to you is called the Lifeboat, which we think we're going to take about 10 years to produce. We'll spend a few $100 million over that period of time of our own money plus others, which is to produce a solution of infrastructure that I don't see any governments working on. And I don't think any government will or be able to. Which is in the next 25 years, there's going to be 1 billion people that are displaced. So you could call that homeless for the most part. Many of them will not have identification. We ought to start working on that somewhere. And I know competitors to me who have different ideas about the same problem, thankfully. So it doesn't just depend on whether our ideas and implementation are good enough. I think it's going to happen in what's the real power of the 21st century is social entrepreneurship. Totally believe that. Totally believe that. It's not altruism. It's not hope. It's not utopia or any of that stuff. It's really practical. Let's just get on with it and do the things we know how to do. So example, this project I'm mentioning to address this problem in the hands of an entrepreneur. Sorry, I didn't turn off my WhatsApp.
No worries.
And in the hands of an entrepreneur, we look at solutions, right? And I am not, there you are. We look at solutions. So, okay, can we make water from the air? That's a yes. We have so much water untapped in the air that we can extract only using generators powered by the sun that we can make water in the desert. There are some people who just heard what I just said. That's a revelation. I mean, that's a before and after as far as I'm concerned. Water scarcity is the biggest driver of conflict in the world, bar none. And so if we can solve that, we have an implementation problem there. But if we can get water from the sky, then we can make food. And if we can figure out how to turn waste into nanomaterials and recombine them into other materials for construction with carbon and all that stuff, we know how to do that now too. So if we take all of these tools and put them together and 3D print them into a home of 2,500 square feet that 4 people can live in and have it even be able to live on water or land and be able to, combine together with others in a pod, well, now you have something that's legitimate that people could actually live in, and you could actually have it produce income. So you could have a sustainable business model to literally give people homes. That can be done. And I've got competitors who want to do it too, right? So we live in a world of Jimmy's. We live in a world of Daniels, and everybody here on listening to this, or you wouldn't be listening to this. We're all part of this generation that's just taking in, we're in different chronological generations, but you and I are in the same generation of humanity, right? To say, how do we now put this to work? And it begins by making agreement after agreement after agreement after agreement. It does not happen by alignment alone. Alignment alone does not pay the bills, but agreement does.
Amen. Amen to that. I love it. So I want to learn a bit more about your journey towards Impact Launchpad. I'm in complete agreement with you that social enterprise is the future, and that's how we can really scale solutions around the world. So what gave you the idea to do Impact Launchpad, and how did you go about starting what this is?
So I first came up with the concept of the Bank of Humanity, what we now call the Bank of Humanity, which is a project to create an investment bank that people like you and I in the future can use for our projects. We can go into that later or another time or whatever, but I came up with that first. If you go back to impactlaunchpad.com on the Wayback Machine, you'll see that the statement of the company was how to make it safe to invest in humanity. Because our theory is that if there's 500 trillion of wealth we know how to count in the world, and there's 30 trillion of a gap in sustainable development funding over the next 5 years, half of that in climate, we don't have a money problem, right? Just like you were talking about the food. You get the point, right? So when you used to look at impactlaunchpad.com, that's all you see is the cause of the company. That's now on a link on our site called Bank. You can just see a link devoted to that project, the Bank of Humanity. But what you'll see on Impact Launchpad now is we created a company around developing projects that we wanted to use this bank for. And we develop projects, as many of my competitors do, on a case-by-case basis. Some are fee-paying clients we have, some are pro bono, some are people we take an interest in, and so on and so forth. And we serve as not a crypto launchpad only, but a real-world launchpad where we take ideas, projects, and clients and help make their ideas reality by basically a blend of management, consulting, investment, banking, and incubation, kind of all rolled into one smoothie. And we have, intellectual property about how we help them do that. And largely it's about how we formalize communications into product, both products internally as well as externally. Sometimes the most important intellectual property a company or an organization has that they have not yet developed is their internal culture. If you think about is there enough is about a culture of culture. Like when we do that professionally, which we kind of take the same sort of ethic into business, if we run into a company that's stuck or a project that's stuck for some reason where it's very obvious how valuable it is, but people don't understand it, it's usually about the internal communication before it's about the external communication. So Impact Launchpad exists to develop projects. Some of them are client projects, even our universal income project we're intending to launch as part of the agreement economy. Our version of universal income was a client project, not my own. Our community project development app, which Sean has already written quite a bit of without realizing it, is called Humanity. That's a client project, where the treaty is something we generated and the 100% project is something we generated, and the Bank of Humanity is. So we're there to serve proliferation of projects. The incubator of Impact Launchpad gave birth to the agreement economy, which is an incubator of its own. And the Bank of Humanity is really a financial support system to launch independent impact funds. And each one of them would be like its own incubator. So we're just incubation machine here. That's what we are.
Wow, incubation machine. I like the culture of cultures. Sometimes when founders start organizations, cultures are something that kind of just happen. But I think being very intentional about that early on could set you up. Like you said, that could be your number one IP. So yeah?
Well, I was just thinking there's two things that focusing on that does is it allows you to focus on those core things that you'll never compromise on in making agreement, because they're your core values and your identity and who you are. And if you don't, I recently had an opportunity, I'll just say right here on air, to meet one of my childhood heroes of Popstar to endorse what we're doing. Like, I'll tell you offline who it is, so I don't have to embarrass anybody, but it would be world changing that this person would, be endorsing the Is There Enough conversation. It's a figure of undisputed peace in the world, and we're about a peace treaty, right? But the conditions and terms that it was applied to was a way that would not have been within the spirit of our culture. And I'm Mr. Yes Man. I try to say yes. I literally tell people that's my job, is to say yes. But if I have certain things I have to say no on, I need to know what those are. And I sometimes tell clients who are struggling to get clients, if you first define which clients you won't do business with, you're going to find you're going to do more business with the clients you're really looking for. So that's the reason for that.
Got it. So the reason is to really make a decision-making framework for yourself, almost, so that you're always true to those most important things.
Values, right? Which is when you talk about prompt engineering and everything else like that Sean was talking about, right? That there's more to it than just what I'm asking ChatGPT. It's like, what am I asking myself before I even ask? And sometimes, by the way, it's a really powerful tool to ask ChatGPT, what could I be asking you myself about this that I did not know how to ask? Everybody should write that one down on any topic you're searching. But that's really what we are, is about framing the questions in the best possible way, both in life conversation and in digital conversation.
Right. Okay. And so how, what's the, without getting too much into your secret sauce, what is the process for creating the best cultures and those decision-making process? Is it like should the co-founders kind of get together and get clear on their values first, and then how do you then make sure that that's proliferated as an organization scales, and how is culture ultimately created?
Number one, everybody has to ask if culture is important enough to care about itself. That's what I mean by the culture of culture. Okay. And if you think about this on a wider societal aspect, while politics and that sort of world order and nation state thing is obviously crumbling, at the same time, what is going to be the response is to build cultural institutions, not political ones. And if you look at it, it's kind of a meme world anyway, right? It's all memeified. It's all really, politics is an extension of culture. So wherever you have agency is on culture itself. And I think, like, for corporations and founders and professional institutions and unions and, churches and synagogues and all of them, to sort of raise up their level of culture, of decision and definition about the things that are absolutely crystal clear as your North Stars. And then have as few of those as possible. Myself, I try to have as few of those as possible. Number one is sort of my culture of culture. Also, one of my cultures of culture is, am I willing to give benefit of the doubt to the others? Am I willing to accept that when we have conflict and mean it, even when it's incredibly difficult, to accept that conflict is a natural order and it's not a reason to turn into drama and upset, or if it even is in drama upset, that doesn't need to be more drama and upset. Like in the non-war way, we need to sort of accept things and lower the escalation a little bit and get back to solution and recognition where we're on the same page. I'm on a recording talking about this, but just to put it in references, if an accountant and a marketer are working in your company for you, they can either be at each other's throats or they can be supporting each other. If one thinks the other's a dreamer and the other thinks the other has no vision, they're right. But can they sort of complement that towards your vision, because you were clear enough with their vision and you were able to enroll them? Which, Jimmy, let's talk about you in the third party for a moment. Are you a pretty good enroller? How valuable, if you had to take, I'm only going to give you Jimmy's great ideas or Jimmy's ability to roll, which has more power? I'm glad you have both, right? I'm glad that you have that spirit of love from the time you're 4 years old to give you this special appreciation that I'm able to live through you. But it's your ability to go out and enroll. And Marsha Martin, who's probably some of you have never heard of, but a really instrumental person in the history of human transformation and potential, says that the first step of transformation is enrollment, to which I would say, I have to be enrolled first as a leader, and I have to be willing to enroll everybody else, is are we willing to make this a priority? Even though we're a brand new company and we could work that out later and let somebody else come in and figure that out. And culture is not for the outside. Culture is for the inside first.
Culture's for the inside first. Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Okay. Got it. And then when we try to scale impact, because any impact is great, but ultimately we're going after massive challenges here that the world is facing. And when social enterprise, sometimes it can be daunting for people to think about how massive the problems are that we're setting out to solve. But that requires scalable solutions, right? And trying to reach scale. And I think you were thinking really big as well about how do we get humanity on board with things. What would you recommend to a social entrepreneur that's trying to scale and that's trying to think big and take huge leaps towards making a scalable impact?
Well, let me transplant my own story a little bit and see how people can relate to it in this way. Is I was past my 50s already when I came up with the idea of what's now flourished into the Bank of Humanity, but it did not become that instantly. I only had the idea of how to prove that you could de-risk social impact investment in this model I have. And I was going to prove it with $100 million fund. And I had everything in works to do that. And I was starting to enroll people towards this nice little demonstration. I thought maybe I'll write a book or do a documentary and sort of demonstrate to the world how this could be done. And somebody says to me, and that poor guy had to listen to my pitch for like 10 hours to try to figure out and explain what I was thinking about over a bunch of whiteboards and everything. He was very patient with me. And when he realized what I was up to, everybody needs somebody like that who's just really willing to listen to you in the beginning. And because this is also for a founder, I was really willing to listen to him in return, right? He said to me, Daniel, he said, what if it was like an SBA loan for social impact? What do you mean? He goes, well, you go to the SBA, 80% of it is covered by the government, so there's a lot less risk for the bank to support it. And
sorry, what's SBA real quick?
Thank you for clarifying. Small Business Administration loan in the United States.
Okay,
in the United States, they have this program where up to now, the government has covered 80% of the risk if you qualify for a Small Business Administration loan. There's certain requirements for that. And he said, what if it was not 80%, but 100%? And what if it was sponsored by the World Bank? I didn't know anybody at the World Bank when he made this statement to me. But I went home and I didn't leave my bed for 2 days staring at the ceiling other than getting food. Recognizing that all the work that I'd put into creating this model really would be far more valuable at a massive level than just trying to do this one time. And I just had to, like, as if you're on a roller coaster, going down and you can't stop anymore. You're just going to have to go with it. It was like I realized everything I'm doing right now that is more than 6 years since this moment. And what I have to tell you is along the way, the agreements that happened is I just said to myself, I don't know anybody in the World Bank. I barely even know the distinction between them and the IMF. I'm not connected in that world whatsoever, even though I was an active social impact producer already. But I didn't have that level of gravitas or anything. And I said, but if I can come up with a plan that's so compelling that they could not possibly say no, then I can get them on board. And if I can do that, I can really transform this, right? And so I set this agreement as the agreement for me to get. And then I realized I'd have to build a whole other bunch of agreements on the way there. I started mapping out what those were. And I counseled myself that, if I write a movie for Bruce Willis, let's say, and I end up putting Sylvester Stallone in it to take, 2 characters from, years ago that I could relate this to, it doesn't matter. It's a writing tool. So I said, if I don't get the World Bank in the end, I'll get some other institution to step in and play the role that I'm asking them to play. And I started building all the relationships around the business plan for that. And 1 year later, I was in business with, at that time, the World Bank's top crypto advisor, which is in 2019, and made enormous amounts of relationships through that world that I count on today, including like a the UN Human Rights Commissioner, and the Premier of Bermuda, who endorsed us very early on. The UN SDG Joint Development Fund has had their eye on what we're up to for quite a while. Actually, I can tell you that Impact Launchpad's first email form request for somebody to talk to us was from the UN SDG Joint Development Fund. That's a true story. So my relationship to the question that you asked is, I had a definiteness that I was after. I didn't know how to get there, but the definiteness preceded the how to get there. And I perturbated on how until I could write that story and figure it out. And I was able to develop a strategy enough to get me there. And part of that story was the discovery of this is there enough question as being something that everyone could relate to, not just people looking at the world game from an investment perspective, the way that I was. And I'm not a finance professional. Neither is the founder of modern monetary theory either. He comes from outside of that game, and I relate myself to him because at this moment I'm beginning to be taken seriously through the actual model of the Bank of Humanity that we haven't talked about here today, but enough people have gone through the scrutiny of it to know that I have a circular investment model that has no holes in it because it's supported by a new form of insurance. Insurance, to the point in insurance now, let's think about that if I wanted to invest money in scaling people like Sean, I could do it without any risk. No risk. Think about how much bigger and more fruitful this world would be if you could take all the innovation out there and have this fluid market that could invest in that and handle losses as well as successes, just like you insure hurricanes after the fact. That's the real invention of the Bank of Humanity.
How does the insurance part work? Who is insuring it? Okay.
So I'll answer that in this frame first, before I set up who is insuring. Is I want the Jimmys of the world 5 to 7 years from now, and along the way the pieces in between, but as a normal routine thing, would be able to apply to have access to $100 million fund for the purpose of largely impact investment, but innovation generally, that you would apply to run and manage and direct the social impact investment of that $100 million fund, which is in an SPV, a special purpose vehicle, an entity, a company that we called ownerless before we knew what a DAO was. So it's obviously now a DAO. And this DAO will give you, under certain terms and conditions of how it has to operate, will put $100 million of capital into your hands to manage. And we'll give you 5 years to invest in as much social impact as you can. And at the end of 5 years, you will simply have had to make it positive. It will have to serve 2 sets of stakeholders, bondholders and collateral holders. And both of those being satisfied, as long as you can get it to be worth $1 more than $100 million at the end of 5 years, you, Jimmy, from running that, will have gotten a very big payout for yourself. That is your personal incentive in running that fund. If you get it to be worth $120 million and it started with 100, that fund will now go on and be a $20 million fund in perpetuity to whatever it can grow or fail, after that on its own. And so this machine, this 5-year machine that you're coming in and doing your part in operating, what you're setting in motion is a perpetual impact investment machine. And that's a $100 million container. And that $100 million container is meant to be one of thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of those, right? You would be proposing a game plan. These are the projects I'm going to invest in. This is the management team I'm bringing in. This is exactly what my game plan is about. And there would be some governance that would approve you for that and so on. There'll be education about how to, apply for that. I want to create a kind of environment where in my generation, back of my parents' generation, let's say a Peace Corps volunteer mindset, which might be people like you and I in another generation, don't have to quit after 5 years and get a real job. They can live their whole life in social benefit and actually, benefit themselves financially as well in a very reasonably way, not massive way, but reasonable enough to live very well. And so that kind of environment would be based on solely based on my ability to sell collateral holders to pledge collateral to this bank in the same way that we think of staking in the crypto world. And the thing that staking teaches us, farming and liquidity pools and all that stuff, is that capital loves capital, just like people need people. And so what I set out to do was create an incentive for those of the ultra high net worth capability that normally people like me are knocking on the door on and going, hey, look at Jimmy's project. Can we put some of your, if you're a really great social impact family office, for example, you're probably committing 1 or 2% of your total net worth to the Jimmy projects of the world. And I and every other social impact producer, investor, fund manager, whatever, is knocking on their door to do that. I'm going to come to them instead, and I'm going to say, I'd like to create a new financial product in our good friend collaboration with you. And I'm going to say that if you allow us to pledge your existing assets against this bank, and I'm going to pay you for that privilege, I'm going to pay you 3% a year in an insurance premium. Let's say that same family office, the other 98% of what they have is in real estate. I mean, I know these people, right? We all know this fact. Real estate and fixed rate products. And the investment managers are paid to not lose money. They're not paid to grow. They're paid to not lose money. That's their profession. I've had that said to me specifically. And so what we say is, let's say you have a portion of some fixed rate products in some bonds and T-bills and muni bonds or whatever the heck they're in your fixed rate portfolio that you would normally never use for social impact. If you pledge it as collateral to this bank, we will pay 3% additional on what you're already earning. So if you're getting, let's say, 5% on that pool, now you're getting 8% because you pledged it to our collateral. Now, when I go sell a bond against that to a bondholder, I don't have to sell it to an investor. Just like in World War I and World War II, when we had war bonds, which are, in my view, existence bonds, right? And I'm saying these are existence bonds we would be selling, humanity bonds, right? Survival bonds. Is we would say to the average man on the way your grandparents invested in survival, you can invest in survival. You had the government standing behind it, but I have something better than the government. I have dollar for dollar collateral. I have something better than what's called in the United States, the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation. Australia, you have another version, and in Europe, it's called the Resolutions Board. There's about 50 of these regional deposit insurance corporations, which have their assets guaranteed by insurance. So I'm recreating that insurance with private assets at 100 cents on the dollar. And so instead of having a limitation on how much your assets are protected in a deposit insurance corporation, there's always a limit. There's no limit in ours because it's by actual collateral. So at the end of 5 years, if somebody bought a bond and the fund, this ownerless impact DAO, runs out of money, is not capable of paying the full collateral, the full principal back to the bondholder, the collateral holder has to pay it. I have already successfully sold those collateral holders in enough cases to know that they want the deal, because they end up getting access to certain other benefits in that kind of situation that it might be hard for me to describe on an audio only, but without a visual. And you and I can make a video sometime and go through it and explain it so people are super clear. But there's such a benefit in a what's called a turnaround situation like that. If at the end of that 5 years, instead of being worth 120, you went and managed this $100 million fund, and sorry, Jimmy, you only made it worth 85 at the end of 5 years, that $15 million difference that the collateral holders would have to meet in order to make the bondholders whole allows them to have access to assets that they get to own that they never would have owned before. And those assets are very interesting in that scenario. So it's really a circular impact investment economy. And we're starting with $1 billion over 10 $100 million funds about 24 months from now. And the agreement economy, that is the 100% project, is going to be part of the collateral staking of that project, along with the World Bank, along with some family offices, along with the government of Bermuda, and some involvement of the joint SDG development fund. That's how we create the collateral.
Okay, so there are those groups that you mentioned, Bermuda family offices, funds and such, that would back the bond. The bond, which ends up being an investment vehicle for. Oh, you said it's like $100 million funds, like these things.
Yeah, and $100 million fund units is the reason for that. Is it's large enough to create some impact, right? $100 million in your hands for 5 years, we do an enormous amount, right? So it's large enough to make an impact, but if it fails, it's not a big impact. It's perfect size for that. And we call this the 100% project, and the world game is how to make the world work for 100% of humanity. And these funds are in $100 million units, and we're out to get 100 million signers of the treaty, not 1 billion and not 6 billion and not every human being, just issuing 100 million certificates. And that's just basically where our brand identity comes from. We don't think you need everybody to make the world better. You just need enough people to make the world better.
That's right. And in the case of not replenishing, then those funds would cop that. But because they're gaining access to other assets, other benefits, they're okay with that.
Let me be specific. I mean, on two things. Number one, if I am successful or not successful getting this collateral agreement, the bank does or does not go forward. It's that and that only, right?
Yes.
So I have to prove that. Second is when a bank fails and an FDIC comes in to take it over, make all the depositors whole, they then have the assets of the bank and they have to make a decision. Are we going to shut it down, merge it with another bank, or bring in new management and turn it around? And so there are benefits in that situation for the FDIC over time as well, which they can sustain over time. You know, they get their money back at the end. They're just basically creating time. This is the thing, is we don't really understand what money is. We don't. It's built by agreement, like I said, right? There's never been any type of money we ever invented from the Phoenician times to now. And obviously blockchain is totally an agreement economy, a consensus economy, which is why I'm able to reach non-crypto people also, because I'm having a conversation about trust and agreement, which is what blockchain was supposed to have solved, was a trust problem, and has not solved. Despite the technology being quote unquote trustless. It's trustworthy in my view. But we have the ability to print endless amounts of money if we print it effectively, correctly, and invest it in the right things to the level of what the human economy can support. There's not some little amount of figuring out some money sitting in a central bank that we just figure out how much we can allot. They're all printing money and burning money, just like we print tokens and burn tokens. People don't know that when you send your money in taxes to the US government, for example, they burn that money. They don't put it in an account. Like it looks like that, but it's absolutely not the case. That's why I referred to modern monetary theory before. So what we're talking about doing is operating from the principle that abundance is a norm and scarcity is man-made and man-tolerated. And very real. If I don't have enough money to buy bread, I don't have enough money to buy bread. There's nothing that's going to change. No amount of abundance thinking is going to change that. But I can recognize that it is conditions which we have agency over if we make enough agreement. Because if I don't have enough money to buy bread and you're my friend, or I told you a joke or whatever it was, and you gave me some of your bread, that's a form of wealth. Really is, right? It's not as convenient as cash is. But if we only focus on the cash and not on the wealth, I think we keep in this destructive cycle. That makes sense?
That does make sense. I love it. Thank you, Daniel. I appreciate you. We definitely got to do this again before Let's Go Live ends and talk deeper. I'm still so confused if Will T's hand is actually up. No, this is just his new profile picture now. But yeah, thank you so much for coming through. Anything that I haven't asked so far that you want to share before we conclude this interview?
We should drop this on here because it affects the way people your and my story as well.
Sure.
I think you and I have recognized a broad range of collaboration, not only on your project now, but a bunch of other things across the board. We're making some very big moves as Impact Launchpad now, not as the agreement economy or that, but Impact Launchpad to make a big play in carbon credits. I think there's going to be some historic announcements soon that maybe I can come back and announce when we're ready to do that very soon. And we see our connection to you as exemplary of that I think everybody listening, as somebody said to me recently, like, carbon is a business of the future. And you're part of that economy of demonstrating that. You know, it's what we value that's worth paying for. And it's worth paying for what it is you're doing because you're generating something that is proof of value. It's proof of planting, proof of trees, but it's proof of value that we can recognize and identify. And I think that the incubation that we're looking to do, you and I, is not only with you, but other projects that you and I are talking about as well, including many that are on here. So it's a big future there.
Very excited. Very, very excited for everything that's to come, Daniel. I'm so grateful that we got connected. I really am, because yeah, it's gonna be incredible. All the different things that can happen from large scale restoration to breaking more world records and fueling that with not just potential avenues to funding, but also the amazing expertise and wisdom that you have that we were able to share a bit of today. Yeah, go ahead.
I just realized something, that if my partners were watching you and I talk and realized I had said nothing about the human rights wallet, they would be aghast. And drop that is that the Treaty of Humanity that we're releasing as part of the agreement economy, which will take off in earnest in September based on money we've raised to do that with. It'll be available in private sales. There's a telegram related to it that you can find on isthereenough.org/socials. You'll see all of our socials there. Please, everybody, follow them and help us be known in the world. That would be appreciated. Our YouTube as well.
isthereenough.com/socials.
It's .org. .org.
isthereenough.org/socials. Okay.
Yep. But I do want to say that the Treaty of Humanity will be part of the Human Rights Wallet, which will also be a hub of activities of commitment besides the treaty. I would like to see that your organization has its own commitment at some point that you can build on top of our commitment tech, is what it is, treaty tech. And everybody that has their own human constitution of whatever kind can use it to establish their own, soul-bound NFTs, like you've talked about, dynamic soul-bound NFTs that they can communicate with each other on, and us and everything else. It's going to be a hub of activity using things like litter maps and other things of that kind, where people can really get together and collaborate. And that will be all centered around this human rights wallet, which will have money. It'll have, regular NFTs, let's say, are collectibles, and your rights and commitments. And I see all of the people in these organizations that you and I are interacting with, they all have a cause, they all have a commitment, and they're all out to, like I said, transformation begins by enrollment. So this gives an activity of enrollment that's going to exist in the agreement economy. So I'd love it if everybody would follow those socials and help bring some attention to that. I think it'll be well worth you saying, hey, I saw that first, kind of thing. Because not a lot of people know about this yet. So.
Right on.
All right.
Well, yeah. Looking forward to delving deeper.
Thanks.
isthereenough.org/socials.
Yep.
Check them out. Human Rights Wallet. Let's grow. Thank you again, Daniel. Appreciate you.
You too, man.
And let's continue these discussions over until 16th. We got 8 more days of broadcast.
I'm going to get you a few other interviews too. Okay. Bye-bye.
Oh, amazing. Looking forward to it. All right. Take care, Daniel. All the best.
You too.
Okay.